A
Where are the
self-made
points
millionaire
now on
just
the B?
committed career suicide in front of America's most beloved judge. What he did next shocked everyone in that courtroom. And what happened when his lawyer dragged him back 6 hours later will leave viewers speechless. This is the story of how Danny Morrison's arrogance nearly destroyed everything he'd built, and how one judge's wisdom saved him from himself. 47-year-old Danny Morrison, owner of 3 car dealerships, employer of 47 people, self-proclaimed titan of Providence business, walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom like he owned the place. Designer suit, gold Rolex catching the afternoon light, the swagger of a man who'd bought his way out of every problem for 2 decades. He had no idea he was about to commit the biggest mistake of his life. What Danny did in that courtroom, the words he spat at one of America's most respected judges, the contempt he displayed, the arrogance he weaponized, would haunt him for months. But what happened when he came crawling back? That's when the real transformation began. This isn't just a story about a traffic ticket. This is a story about what happens when unchecked ego collides with immovable wisdom. When money can't buy respect. When a man who thought he was untouchable learned that in Judge Caprio's courtroom, everyone bleeds the same. Before this explosive confrontation unfolds, before viewers witness a grown man's complete meltdown followed by his redemption, hit that like button. Because what Judge Caprio does to transform this entitled millionaire into a servant leader is something every American needs to see. Drop a comment about a time when someone's arrogance completely backfired on them. Share the city viewers are watching from, because this lesson about respect and consequences resonates from Seattle to Miami, from Boston to San Diego. Judge Caprio's wisdom works everywhere, and what Danny Morrison learns in the next 6 months will change how viewers think about success, service, and what really matters in life. Stick around until the end. Because what Judge Caprio says to Danny in their final exchange, after 6 months of transformation, will give viewers chills and restore their faith in both justice and the human capacity for change. Friday afternoon, 3:30 p.m., Providence Municipal Court. The week was dying a slow death. Judge Frank Caprio, 77 years old, 5 decades on the bench, a living legend in Rhode Island judicial circles, was reviewing the last case on his docket. His reading glasses perched on his weathered face. His shoulders carried the weight of thousands of decisions made over 45 years of service. One more case. Then the weekend. Then rest. Danny Morrison, age 47, charged with reckless driving and failure to appear at his original court date. The bailiff's voice cut through the afternoon lethargy. Case number 73D, Daniel Morrison versus the state of Rhode Island. The courtroom doors swung open. Danny Morrison didn't walk in. He strutted, like a CEO entering a board meeting where everyone already knew who was boss. The expensive Italian suit, probably $3,000, moved with him like liquid confidence. Designer shoes clicked against the marble floor with the precision of money. That Rolex on his wrist, it cost more than most people in that courtroom made in 6 months. His BMW sat outside in a no-parking zone. He'd figured he'd only be a few minutes. Because that's how Danny Morrison operated. Rules were suggestions for people without his resources. The gallery held maybe a dozen people waiting for their own dates with justice. An elderly woman clutching her purse like it held her life savings. 2 young guys in work clothes whispering about parking tickets. A single mom trying to keep her toddler quiet. Regular people dealing with regular problems. The court stenographer glanced up and immediately recognized the type. She'd seen 1,000 Danny Morrisons walk through those doors. They all thought they were special. They were all wrong. Officer Martinez, the cop who'd written Danny's original citation, sat in the back row, arms crossed, curious to see how this would play out. He'd seen the dashcam footage. He knew what Danny had done. And he knew Danny thought money would make it all disappear. Danny approached the bench with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never met a problem his checkbook couldn't solve. No respectful posture. No, Your Honor. Just a man who clearly believed this entire proceeding was beneath him. "Yeah, I'm here about the driving thing," Danny announced, not bothering to stand straight or make eye contact. His tone suggested he was doing everyone a favor by showing up at all. Judge Caprio looked up from the paperwork. His expression remained neutral. Decades of training kept his face unreadable, but his eyes noted every detail. The posture, the tone, the complete absence of respect. In nearly 5 decades on that bench, Frank Caprio had developed a particular radar for arrogance masquerading as importance. And every alarm in his system was screaming. "Look, Judge," Danny continued, waving his hand dismissively. "I'm a busy man. I employ 47 people. I pay more in taxes than most folks in this room make in a year. Can we just settle this with a fine so I can get back to running my businesses? I've got a shipment coming in at 5 p.m. The courtroom temperature dropped several degrees. Judge Caprio removed his reading glasses slowly, cleaned them with his handkerchief. A ritual that courthouse veterans knew meant something significant was brewing. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Caprio's voice carried the calm authority of a man who'd seen it all and been impressed by none of it. "You failed to appear for your original court date. Today, we're addressing both the reckless driving charge and your failure to respect this court's schedule. Do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" Danny checked his watch. That goddamn Rolex, like he was calculating how much money this conversation was costing him. "Serious. Judge, with all due respect, I've got real problems. Employee disputes, inventory issues, a dealership expanding into Massachusetts. This?" He gestured vaguely at the courtroom. "This is a speed bump." The elderly woman in the gallery gasped softly. The 2 young men exchanged shocked glances. Even the bailiff's hand moved instinctively toward his belt, sensing escalation. Judge Caprio's posture straightened. His words became more deliberate, each syllable weighted with authority. "Mr. Morrison, this court operates on respect. Respect for the law. Respect for the process. Respect for every citizen who appears before it. Your attitude suggests you believe your business dealings excuse you from the same responsibilities that apply to everyone else." Danny actually laughed. He laughed in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. "Come on, Judge." Danny's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "You know how the world works. People like me keep this economy running. We create jobs, we pay taxes. A little flexibility goes a long way. I'm not some punk kid stealing candy. I'm a pillar of this community." The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Even the court reporter stopped typing. The only sound was the air conditioning humming and Danny Morrison digging his own grave with words. Judge Caprio removed his glasses completely, placed them deliberately on the bench. Veteran court watchers knew this gesture. It meant the judge was about to deliver a lesson. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Caprio said, his voice carrying the weight of 45 years of judicial authority, "you seem to believe that your financial success exempts you from showing basic respect in my courtroom." What Danny Morrison did next would become legendary in Providence legal circles, for all the wrong reasons. He threw his hands up in exaggerated exasperation, like a teenager being asked to clean his room. "Respect?" Danny's voice climbed several octaves. "Look, I've been paying people's salaries in this city for 15 years. Half the cops who wrote this ticket probably bought their cars from my lots. You want to lecture me about respect when I'm the one keeping this place afloat?" The courtroom erupted in whispers. Court officers exchanged glances that said, "Did he really just say that?" The elderly woman covered her mouth in shock. Officer Martinez shook his head slowly, already knowing how this would end. Judge Caprio's bailiff, a veteran of 20 years, took a step forward, sensing the situation was about to spiral completely out of control. But Judge Caprio remained still, watching, observing, his 77-year-old frame carrying the dignity of his office like armor. The entire courtroom fell silent again. Even the whispers stopped. Because when Judge Frank Caprio stood up, slowly, deliberately, everyone paid attention. His voice dropped to a level that somehow commanded more attention than any shout. "Sir, your wealth does not grant you immunity from courtesy. Your tax contributions do not purchase you special treatment in my courtroom. And your employment of 47 people does not excuse your fundamental failure to understand that in this courtroom, we are all equal under the law." Danny's face flushed scarlet. Years of having employees defer to him. Years of having his money smooth over every problem. Years of believing he was untouchable. It all came crashing down in that moment. But instead of backing down, Danny doubled down. "Equal under the law," his voice dripped with contempt. "That's rich coming from a system that lets real criminals walk while harassing successful businessmen over a simple traffic violation." He jabbed his finger toward Judge Caprio. "I don't have time for this philosophical lecture from someone who's never had to meet a payroll. I've got 47 families depending on me. What have you done except sit on that bench and judge people for decades?" The insult hung in the air like a physical presence. Judge Frank Caprio, who immigrated to America as a child, who worked construction jobs to pay for law school, who'd spent 45 years of his life in public service, earning a fraction of what Danny made in a month, who dedicated his existence to serving his community with dignity and compassion, absorbed the blow with visible restraint. His jaw tightened, just slightly, but he maintained control. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to give you one opportunity, one chance, to reconsider your approach and show this court the respect it deserves." Danny checked his watch again, made an exaggerated sighing sound, like he was being forced to waste time on children. And then he delivered the line that would haunt him for 6 months. "You know what? I'm done with this. I've got real problems to deal with. Real business, real money on the line." The courtroom watched in stunned, absolute silence as Danny Morrison turned his back on Judge Frank Caprio and strode toward the exit. Not slowly, not hesitantly, with the confident swagger of a man who'd never faced consequences in his life. Judge Caprio's voice followed him, calm, but carrying absolute authority that filled every corner of that courtroom. "Mr. Morrison, if you leave this courtroom without being dismissed, you will be in contempt of court. Do you understand what that means?" Danny didn't even turn around. He waved his hand dismissively over his shoulder, a gesture of supreme disrespect. "Add it to my tab, Your Honor." The emphasis on "Your Honor" was mocking, dripping with sarcasm, a final insult thrown over his shoulder as he pushed through those courtroom doors and disappeared into the hallway. The doors swung shut behind him with a sound like a coffin closing. For 10 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. They had just witnessed something unprecedented in Judge Frank Caprio's 45 years on the bench. Complete, total, unrepentant contempt. A man walking out in the middle of proceedings like he was leaving a restaurant with bad service. Judge Caprio stood for a long moment, processing what had just occurred. His weathered face showed no anger, only profound disappointment in what humanity could sink to. "Court will be in recess," he announced quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of what he'd just witnessed. "Mr. Morrison's case will be rescheduled. Additional charges will be filed." The court reporter's fingers trembled as she typed those final words. Everyone in that courtroom knew they'd just witnessed a man commit professional suicide. 30 minutes later, Danny Morrison sat in his BMW outside the courthouse, windows down, October air flowing through. He was already on his phone making calls about a car auction, dismissing the entire court experience as a waste of his valuable time. His phone rang. Chen Law Offices on the caller ID. Robert Chen, his attorney of 8 years. The guy who'd gotten him out of every jam, settled every lawsuit, smoothed over every legal problem Danny's aggressive business tactics had created. "Bob, I was just about to call you. You won't believe the circus I just dealt with." "Danny," Robert's voice cut through like a knife. "Please tell me you didn't actually walk out on Judge Frank Caprio." Danny barely looked up from his auction catalog. "Bob, relax. It was just some old judge on a power trip. I've got bigger problems than a traffic ticket. Besides, worst case, you'll handle it." "That's what I pay you for." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched uncomfortably long. When Robert spoke again, his voice carried an urgency Danny had never heard before. Not when they'd settled the sexual harassment lawsuit. Not when they dealt with the IRS audit. Not ever. "Danny, you need to listen to me very carefully. Judge Frank Caprio isn't just some old judge. He's one of the most respected jurists in New England. He's a legend. What you just did, Danny, you could be facing serious jail time." Danny actually laughed. "Jail time? For a traffic ticket? Come on, Bob, you're being dramatic." "Danny!" Robert's voice became deadly serious. "You're not listening. You walked out of a courtroom in the middle of proceedings. That's criminal contempt of court. But that's not even the worst part." "What's the worst part?" "Judge Caprio has discretion over your sentencing, and you just showed him the utmost disrespect." "Danny, do you understand what I'm saying? You insulted a man who literally has the power to destroy your life." Danny finally stopped reading his auction catalog. "What are you saying?" Robert's words came fast, urgent, desperate. "I'm saying that instead of a fine and traffic school, which is what you would have gotten, you could be looking at 6 months in jail, loss of your driver's license, criminal charges that could affect your business licenses." The words started to penetrate Danny's armor of arrogance. "Danny, you might have just destroyed everything you've spent 15 years building." The car suddenly felt smaller. The October air suddenly felt colder. That can't be right. It was just a traffic case." "It stopped being just a traffic case the moment you walked out," Robert's voice cracked with frustration. "And Danny, there's something else you need to know about Judge Caprio." Danny's stomach began to twist. "What?" Robert's response hit like a freight train. "Judge Frank Caprio is known for his compassion. He's famous across America for helping people, for understanding their circumstances, for giving second chances to people who genuinely need them. There are viral videos of him for giving tickets for single mothers, for elderly people on fixed incomes, for young people making honest mistakes." The full weight of Danny's mistake started to crash down. "Danny, he probably would have reduced your fine to nothing and sent you to traffic school with a lecture about safe driving. Instead, you insulted a man who has dedicated his entire life to serving his community. You mocked everything he stands for." Danny's mouth went dry. "Bob, what do I do?" Robert's response was immediate and non-negotiable. "We're going back to that courthouse. Today. Right now. You're going to apologize. Genuinely, sincerely apologize. And hope that Judge Caprio's legendary compassion extends to people who have insulted everything he stands for." "Today? It's Friday afternoon." "Danny!" Robert's voice exploded through the phone. "Judge Caprio stayed late to handle your case. The least you can do is get back there before he goes home for the weekend. Every hour that passes makes this worse. Every minute you sit in that BMW thinking you're above consequences digs your grave deeper." An hour later, Robert Chen paced outside the courthouse, his expensive shoes wearing a path in the sidewalk. When Danny's BMW pulled up, this time in a legal parking space, Robert noticed his client looked different. Smaller, somehow. Less confident. The swagger was gone. "Are you ready for this?" Robert asked. Danny nodded, but his usual bravado had completely evaporated. "Bob, what if he won't listen?" "Then you'll face the consequences of your actions." Robert's voice softened slightly. "But Danny, Judge Caprio is known for giving people chances to make things right. The question is whether you're genuinely ready to make things right. Are you actually sorry, or are you just sorry you got caught?" Danny didn't answer immediately, and in that hesitation, Robert saw something he'd never seen before: genuine fear. "I'm sorry, Bob. I'm really sorry." At 4:45 p.m., Judge Frank Caprio sat in his chambers, reviewing Danny Morrison's case file and preparing the contempt charges. His hand moved across the legal pad, detailing the charges that would likely send Danny Morrison to jail. A knock on his door. "Judge," his secretary's voice carried surprise. "Robert Chen is here with his client, Mr. Morrison. They're requesting to address the court." Judge Caprio looked up, genuinely startled. In his experience, 45 years of experience, people who stormed out of his courtroom didn't typically return the same day, seeking reconciliation. They usually fought, appealed, made his life difficult for months. "Tell Mr. Chen I'll see them in 5 minutes." When court reconvened, the atmosphere had completely transformed. Danny Morrison entered behind his attorney, and his change was immediately, viscerally visible to everyone present. Gone was the $3,000 suit, replaced by simple slacks and a button-down shirt. The Rolex was nowhere to be seen. His posture was different, respectful, uncertain, genuinely humbled. Judge Caprio took his seat, his expression unreadable. The courtroom was nearly empty, except for a few court officers and staff who'd stayed late, morbidly curious to see how this unprecedented situation would resolve. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Caprio began, his voice measured and carrying the weight of judicial authority. "This is highly unusual. You left my courtroom without permission, showing contempt for this court and the judicial process. Why have you returned?" Danny stood, and for the first time in the entire proceeding, his voice shook. Not with anger, with genuine emotion. "Your Honor, I came back because I realized I made a terrible mistake. Not just walking out, though that was inexcusable, but in how I conducted myself in your courtroom from the moment I arrived." Judge Caprio listened without interruption. His decades of experience reading people now focused entirely on determining whether this apology was genuine or calculated, whether this was remorse or strategy. "Your Honor," Danny's voice caught. He took a breath, steadied himself. "My attorney explained to me who you are, what you've accomplished, how you've served this community for 45 years, how you immigrated to this country as a child, how you worked construction to pay for law school, how you've dedicated your life to serving others." The courtroom was so quiet they could hear the wall clock ticking. "I came into your courtroom thinking I was more important than the process, more important than showing respect. I thought my money, my business success, my arrogance gave me the right to treat you in this court with contempt." Danny paused, visibly struggling with words that didn't come naturally to someone accustomed to always being right. "I was wrong about everything. I insulted you personally, Your Honor, and I insulted everything this courtroom represents. I have no excuse for my behavior, no justification. I can only tell you that I'm deeply ashamed of how I acted, and I'm here to accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate." Judge Caprio studied Danny for a long, measuring moment. In 4 decades on the bench, he'd developed an almost supernatural ability to distinguish between genuine remorse and manipulation, between real transformation and practice performance. What he saw in Danny Morrison's eyes was something raw, something broken, something real. "Mr. Morrison, when you left here 2 hours ago, you demonstrated contempt, not just for me personally, but for the rule of law itself. You suggested that your wealth and business success entitled you to different treatment under the law. Danny nodded, his face flushed with shame. Yes, Your Honor, and I was completely, fundamentally wrong. You mocked the concept of equality under the law. You dismissed the importance of respect in a courtroom. You insulted my life's work and everything I believe in. Each word hit Danny like a physical blow. He was beginning to understand, truly understand, the magnitude of his mistakes. Yes, Your Honor. I understand that now, and I'm horrified by who I was 2 hours ago. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. Mr. Morrison, tell me something. What changed in the last 2 hours? What brought you back here? Danny took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice carried genuine emotion for the first time in perhaps years. Your Honor, when my attorney told me about your background, how you came to this country with nothing, how you worked yourself through school, how you've dedicated your life to serving others, I realized something that made me sick to my stomach. He paused, gathering courage. I realized that I've spent so much time building my business, accumulating money, chasing success, that I forgot basic human decency. I forgot how to treat people with respect. I forgot that there are things more important than profit margins and business deals. Judge Caprio's expression softened almost imperceptibly. This was the breakthrough he'd been listening for. The moment when ego gives way to genuine understanding. Danny continued, his voice strengthening with conviction. When I walked out of here, I thought I was important because I have money, because I employ people, because I've built something from nothing. He looked directly at Judge Caprio. But you've spent 40 years serving your community, treating everyone with dignity regardless of their bank account. You've touched thousands of lives, and I realized that I've been successful in business. But I failed as a human being today. The words hung in the air, like a confession. Your Honor, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm praying you'll give me an opportunity to prove that I can be better than the man who walked out of here 2 hours ago. Judge Frank Caprio removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a ritual that those who knew him recognized as his way of processing something significant, something that required careful thought. The courtroom was completely silent. Everyone understood they were witnessing something rare, something important, something that transcended the usual business of justice. Mr. Morrison, Judge Caprio began, his voice carrying the weight of 45 years of judicial wisdom. You've given me something to think about this afternoon. Danny remained standing, uncertain whether to hope or prepare for the worst. When you left here 2 hours ago, I was prepared to throw the book at you. Criminal contempt, maximum fines, jail time. Your disrespect was unlike anything I've experienced in my career. In 45 years, I've never had someone show such complete contempt for this courtroom. Danny swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. But you came back, Mr. Morrison. That tells me something important. It tells me that somewhere underneath that arrogance and entitlement, there's a man capable of recognizing his mistakes, a man capable of growth, a man capable of becoming better. Judge Caprio stood, and his presence seemed to fill the entire courtroom. Not with anger, with wisdom, with the authority of someone who'd seen the best and worst of humanity, and still chose to believe in redemption. Let me tell you something about respect, Mr. Morrison. I've been on this bench for over 40 years. I've seen wealthy defendants and poor defendants. I've seen people with PhDs and people who can't read, people with everything and people with nothing. His voice carried the weight of lived experience. And you know what I've learned? A person's character has nothing to do with their bank account and everything to do with how they treat others, especially how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Danny nodded, hanging on every word, like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. You told me you employ 47 people. That's impressive. But Mr. Morrison, those 47 people work for you because you pay them, not because you respect them. True leadership isn't about being the boss. It's about serving others. It's about lifting people up, not standing on top of them. Judge Caprio walked around from behind his bench, something he rarely did, bringing himself closer to eye level with Danny. The gesture was profound. The most powerful man in that courtroom choosing to meet Danny as an equal. When I came to this country as a young man, I learned that America's greatness isn't in its wealth. It's in the promise that everyone, regardless of their background, their bank account, their circumstances, gets equal treatment under the law. His eyes locked onto Danny's. You challenged that principle today. You suggested that your money makes you special, that your success puts you above the rules that govern everyone else. Yes, Your Honor, Danny's voice broke. And I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. You were wrong, Mr. Morrison. But you were also teachable. You came back. You listened. You learned. And that gives me hope. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to do something I've rarely done in cases like this. I'm going to give you a choice. Danny's eyes widened. This wasn't what he expected. Choice 1. I sentence you to the maximum penalty. 6 months in jail, $5,000 in fines, loss of your driver's license, a criminal record that will follow you for the rest of your life. Your business will likely suffer. Your reputation will be destroyed. But the law will be satisfied. The words hit like hammer blows. Danny's face drained of color. Choice 2. Judge Caprio's voice softened slightly. You spend the next 6 months learning what service really means. Every Saturday for 6 months, you'll volunteer at the Providence Community Kitchen, serving meals to people who can't afford them. You'll work alongside people who have nothing but give everything they have to help others. Danny's eyes filled with tears. But that's not all, Mr. Morrison. You'll also spend 4 hours every month in this courtroom sitting in that gallery, watching how real justice works. You'll see me sentence people who show respect despite having nothing. And you'll understand the difference between true dignity and purchased privilege. Judge Caprio returned to his bench, but his voice remained personal, direct, human. If you choose the community service, you'll report to me personally every month. You'll write a report about what you've learned, and at the end of 6 months, if you've genuinely learned what respect and service mean, if you've truly transformed, I'll reduce your charges to a simple traffic violation. Danny could barely speak through the emotion choking his throat. Your Honor, why would you give me this chance? After what I did? After how I treated you? Judge Caprio's response would become the moment that defined both men's lives. The moment that would be replayed in Danny's mind for years to come. Because, Mr. Morrison, I believe in redemption. The words fell like benediction. I believe that people can change, can grow, can become better than their worst moments. You showed me your worst today. Now I want to see your best. He leaned forward, his weathered face showing compassion that transcended judgment. Everyone deserves a second chance, Mr. Morrison. But not everyone deserves a third. Make this count. Danny broke down completely. Tears flowing freely for the first time since childhood. Not tears of manipulation or calculation. Tears of genuine relief, gratitude, and shame all mixed together. Your Honor, he managed through sobs. I choose the community service. I want to learn. I want to be better. I want to become the man you see in me instead of the man I was 2 hours ago. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. Then we have an agreement, Mr. Morrison. Don't make me regret this decision. I won't, Your Honor. I swear to you, I won't. 6 months later, on a bright April morning, Danny Morrison returned to Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom for his final report. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him sat 12 people, volunteers from the Providence Community Kitchen, community court staff, people whose lives he'd touched during his 6 months of service. They'd come to support him, to witness his completion, to celebrate his transformation. Danny approached the bench, but his posture now reflected genuine respect rather than forced compliance. In his hands, he carried a folder thick with reports, letters, photographs, evidence of 6 months that had fundamentally changed who he was. Your Honor, Danny's voice was steady, confident, but humble. I'm here to report on my 6 months of community service. Judge Caprio, now 78, settled back in his chair with genuine curiosity. Over 4 decades, he'd seen many court-ordered services, but rarely had he seen such a visible transformation in someone's demeanor, presence, entire being. Tell me what you've learned, Mr. Morrison. Danny opened his folder but didn't read from it. The words came from his heart, not his preparation. Your Honor, 6 months ago, I thought success meant having money and power. I measured my worth by my bank account and my ability to intimidate others. I thought being a boss made me important. He gestured toward the people who'd come to support him. I was wrong about everything. These people taught me what real success looks like. Maria, sitting in the 3rd row, has been volunteering at the community kitchen for 8 years. She works 2 jobs, one as a nursing assistant, one cleaning offices at night, and still gives her Saturdays to feed people who have nothing. Danny's voice filled with genuine admiration. She taught me that generosity isn't about what you can afford to give. It's about giving regardless of what you can afford. She has almost nothing, Your Honor, but she gives everything. Judge Caprio noticed the genuine emotion in Danny's voice, the way he looked at the volunteers with real respect, not patronizing charity. Your Honor, I'll never forget my first day at the community kitchen. I showed up in a $300 shirt, thinking I was doing charity work, like I was the savior coming to help the poor, unfortunate people. Danny smiled at the memory, but it was a smile of self-awareness, not pride. I tried to serve soup and spilled it everywhere, made a complete mess. And this homeless veteran named Frank, yes, Frank, like you, Your Honor, he patiently showed me how to do it properly. He had weathered hands and kind eyes, and he said something I'll never forget. Danny's voice caught with emotion. He said, "Son, service isn't about looking good. It's about making others feel dignified." This man had lost everything, his home, his family, his job, his sense of purpose, but he still had more grace and dignity than I'd shown in years. The courtroom was absolutely silent, everyone absorbed in Danny's transformation. I've served over 200 meals in the last 6 months, but more importantly, I've eaten alongside people who have nothing but still share what little they have. I've listened to their stories. I've learned that homelessness isn't a choice. It's a series of unfortunate circumstances that could happen to anyone. Your Honor, I spent 4 hours every month sitting in that gallery, watching you work. And I learned something that changed my entire perspective on justice and humanity. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, genuinely curious. I watched you sentence a single mother who'd gotten parking tickets while working 3 jobs. You not only dismissed her fines, you gave her money from your own pocket to help with childcare. I watched you listen to an elderly man explain why he'd parked illegally near a hospital where his wife was dying. You cried with him, Your Honor. Actually cried. Danny's voice grew stronger with conviction. I realized that justice isn't about punishment. It's about understanding. It's about seeing people as human beings with complex lives and difficult circumstances. It's about having the wisdom to know when the law needs compassion and when it needs strength. He pulled out a letter from his folder. Your Honor, this is from the director of the Providence Community Kitchen. She's offered me a position on their board of directors. Not because of my money, though I'm honored to be their largest donor now, but because of the work I've done, because of the relationships I've built, because I've proven that I understand their mission." Judge Caprio's eyebrows raised slightly. This was beyond what he expected. "There's something else, Your Honor. Something I need to tell you about what I've done with my businesses." Danny's voice filled with quiet pride. Not the arrogant pride of 6 months ago, but the pride of someone who'd finally done something worth being proud of. "I've restructured my businesses completely. Every employee now receives profit sharing, full health benefits, paid time off to volunteer. I've created a scholarship fund for their children. I've turned my dealerships into places where people actually want to work, not just places where they're afraid to lose their jobs." He looked directly at Judge Caprio. "I've learned that true success means lifting others up, not standing on top of them. That real leadership is service, not domination. That the only wealth worth having is the wealth you share." Danny placed the folder on the bench, gently, respectfully, then looked up with an expression that hadn't existed on his face 6 months ago. "Your Honor, I came into your courtroom believing success meant control, that leadership meant power, that wealth meant superiority." He shook his head slowly. "I was dead wrong." His voice softened, almost a whisper, but every word carried. "Success, real success, is measured by the lives you touch, the people you lift, the dignity you protect. You taught me that, Your Honor. Not with punishment, not with anger, but with wisdom and compassion I didn't deserve." Danny took a shaky breath, then continued, "I want you to know something before you decide my fate today." He reached into his folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I've created a new program at my dealerships. We call it the Caprio Initiative. Every car we sell, a portion goes to supporting food banks, shelter programs, and legal aid clinics in Providence." The courtroom murmured, soft, surprised, moved. "And I've personally pledged to donate $250,000 over the next 5 years to the Providence Community Kitchen and their expansion plans. Not for publicity, not for a tax write-off, but because—" Danny's voice cracked. "Because those people saved me. You saved me." He swallowed hard, then added, "I'm not the same man who walked out of here 6 months ago, and I never will be again." Judge Frank Caprio looked at Danny Morrison for a long time, longer than anyone in that courtroom expected. There was no anger in his eyes, no disappointment, just a deep, searching evaluation, the kind of look only a man who had spent 45 years studying human nature could give. Finally, Judge Caprio sat back and folded his hands. "Mr. Morrison," he said quietly, "I've read every report, every letter. I've spoken to the director of the community kitchen. I've watched you, month after month, walk into this courtroom with humility and sincerity." Danny's breath caught in his throat. "You didn't just complete your service," Caprio continued. "You embraced it. You allowed it to transform you. You gave more than the sentence required, more than anyone asked of you." The courtroom was absolutely still. "And most importantly, you restored something I feared you had lost." Danny looked up, eyes wet. "What's that, Your Honor?" Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Your humanity." "Mr. Morrison," Judge Caprio said, "I am dismissing your contempt charge." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. "Your reckless driving charge will be reduced to a simple civil violation, a $50 fine." Danny nearly collapsed from relief, but the judge wasn't finished. "However," Danny froze again, "this verdict is not a reward. It is a recognition that you have proven, through action, not words, that you are no longer the man who stood in this courtroom 6 months ago." Judge Caprio's eyes softened with something deeper than compassion, pride. You have become a true leader, a man who serves, a man who lifts others, a man who stands not above the community but with it. Danny nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Your Honor. I won't fail you. Ever. Judge Caprio smiled warmly, a rare, fatherly smile reserved only for the most meaningful moments of his career. I didn't do this for me, Mr. Morrison. I did it for you, for the man I believed you could be. The judge lifted his gavel slightly, then paused. And remember this. His voice carried across the courtroom like a timeless truth. The measure of a man is not how high he stands above others, but how many people he lifts beside him. Gavel strike. Case dismissed. Danny walked out of the courtroom into the spring sunlight. Not as a millionaire, not as a businessman, but as a redeemed man, with purpose. In the months that followed, Danny became one of Rhode Island's most active philanthropists. His employees thrived under new benefits and programs. His dealerships became known not just for selling cars, but for changing lives. The Caprio Initiative grew into a citywide movement encouraging businesses to serve their communities. And every Thanksgiving, Danny returned to the Providence Community Kitchen, not as a sentence, but as a volunteer. He never missed a Saturday again. As for Judge Frank Caprio, he often said Danny Morrison's transformation was one of the proudest moments of his judicial career. Because justice is not about punishment. It's about possibility. It's about the chance to change. It's about the belief that no one is beyond redemption, especially those who believe they are.